everyone. Welcome to another great webinar we have in store for you today. I'll kick off who we're speaking with, who's on our call today, our webinar today in just a moment, but I want to cover a few housekeeping items first. So if you're experiencing any issues with this webinar, please let us know utilizing the Q&A chat. We have a team member on monitoring that chat as we speak, and they will help with any issues. A couple of quick tips is exiting out of this window and rejoining by that link, the registration link, or just refreshing this window should do the trick. But feel free to let us know in the Q&A chat if you're experiencing any other issues or those simple tricks do not help. Also use the Q&A chat to let us know if you have any questions. We will be answering them within the one-to-one Q&A chat, but also answering a few at the end if we have time. So definitely submit them as they come up, but know that we are either answering them in the Q&A chat or answering them live on the call at the end. We are recording this webinar, so you'll receive the recording within 48 hours after we conclude today. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. And then we've surfaced up some resources for you, so feel free to check out the resource list that's at the bottom of your screen right now. And then the last housekeeping item is ZoomInfo is a publicly traded company. This presentation may contain forward-looking statements. Any buying decisions you make should be made based only upon currently available products and offerings. So our complete safe harbor statement is displayed here for your review, but as I mentioned, that resource list, it's also in there if you really want to read the fine print. All right, so who we have for speakers today? We have a power panel back and ready for another great webinar episode. Jeb, he is the CEO and founder of Sales Gravy, as well as a best-selling author of many business books. And Jeb, I'd love to give you the floor in just a moment. I want to intro our other power panelists, but I want to give you the floor in just a moment to talk about the newest book that's coming out. So pause there, folks. And we also have Will Frattini. He is a sales director here at ZoomInfo. He's been here for quite some time. And then lastly, my name is Rebecca. I'm a demand gen manager here, and I will be your host, helping to guide this conversation. But these guys are pros, and they don't need me. All right. So Jeb, he's coming back with us. He's got his newest book that's coming out. So Jeb, feel free. I'd love to hear all about it, and the audience is probably going to be very excited for it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Absolutely. This is called Selling the Price Increase here. Brand new book out. It's hands down the most comprehensive book that's ever been written on how to approach customers with B2B price increases. The good news, it's the only book that's ever been written on how to approach customers with B2B price increases. So it's out, it's ready to go. You can pick it up. It's great for entire sales teams, but it's a comprehensive end-to-end guide for having conversations with your customer base about price increases, which are so important for growing your accounts and for profitability. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, thanks, Rebecca, for the opportunity to pitch.
Of course. So we'll have it in the resource list as well. I didn't want to call it out before it was talked about, but it is in the resource list to get it from Amazon as well as Jeb's website. So feel free to check out both of those links or one of them and purchase today. I'm excited to get my copy soon, hopefully. All right, so let's get into this, guys. This is a really interesting topic for us today, growth and retention of customers, as well as that handoff between, closing the account as a new business to passing it over or being that sole provider of that account and providing both the initial sale to managing that account and potentially even doing some customer support or success on that. So that's what our topic for today. I'm excited to cover it. Jeb, I'd like to kick this first question off for you. This was a fun one that you came up with, and I think it's definitely a good one to kick off with. So what is that one thing that account managers either say or do that drives you nuts?
And by the way, this is when I'm listening to my own account managers in my own company making these calls, but they'll call up an account, and mine's a little bit different than Will's, but mine is how are things going? It drives me crazy. It's a low value question that does nothing for the conversation, and it just tells me that the account manager wasn't prepared. Usually I'm just checking in to see how things are going. That would be even worse. So there's no purpose for them to be there, and it's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me.
All right, well, what is that one thing account managers say and do that drives you nuts?
I thought of a few on our pre-call, but I was like, but let's do one that could be constructive as well. I think I understand how busy everybody is in today's world. There's nothing more frustrating to be a client and not get at least acknowledged, even if you don't have a resolution. So like what I've noticed, that I've seen account managers in any type of company, not acknowledge someone instead of just saying, hey, I don't have an answer for you right now, but give me until X time. And if you don't hear from me by then, please be all over me. I have it on my calendar to get back to you by this time. One that we laughed about though, Jeb and I, so a bonus one was when you have a big group of people showing up to a call, not preparing ahead of time to check down on who everyone is and picking one person to ask to just make sure everyone is there, and instead asking every single person to introduce themselves by name and title. And it takes 10, 15 minutes before the call's even started. Yeah. Those are little nitpicky things, but a little more of a thing to laugh about. But more in the former. Hey, if you have the opportunity, tell someone, I see you, I acknowledge you, I will be back to you by this time. I wish more people did that.
And I think that's super important. I think that when I feel most disrespected by a company, when I'm an existing customer and there's an account manager or even a customer success manager that I'm working with, is that they don't acknowledge me as a human being. So sometimes I'm wrong about something. Sometimes I'm stressed out about things that aren't really germane. Everybody's different. But when you just fail to acknowledge me as a human being and say, I get you, I understand, it makes sense that you feel this way, it really cuts to the quick. But when people do that, when they say, I totally get you, I'm so much more pliable. I mean, I lean in and I relax and I calm down. And I think about my best customer, my best account manager relationships. They're the ones that they totally treat me like a human being. And no matter what's going on, they always have this amazing way to get me to just chill out. And I trust that whatever it is will get resolved.
Love that. Yeah, there's definitely been times where as a buyer, I've been on a call and it's only 30 minutes. And to Will's point, it takes 10 minutes to go through the group of us and what we do and who we are. And when I've been back-to-back emails with them leading up to this and could have had some form of that asked to me then so that they understand who's going to be on the call, all of that fun stuff. I know sometimes I'm sure us as buyers are not easy to get that information out of us in the beginning or before a call. So I totally understand why they ask in some respect, but it does waste that time. So I think it's, you definitely want to have some form of visibility on who's going to be in that call. So definitely, data is definitely a way to be able to have an understanding of who's going to be in that call. So, but moving on, why is it important, Jeb, to establish performance targets and metrics with customers up front, but also ongoing? So why is it so important?
Well, if we just think about account management as a profession, it's something that you do. A great account manager is outcome focused. So the great account manager is focused on helping their customer achieve measurable business outcomes, sometimes personal outcomes, and sometimes emotional outcomes. Like an emotional outcome sometimes it's just calm down and relax, we got this. So that's their job. Well, if you don't understand the customer's metrics that matter, how they're measuring their business, and their business, those measurements, by the way, may not be directly connected to what you do, but understanding how they measure their business, how they conduct their organization, and how measurements and data goes into their culture. If you don't understand that, you have a really hard time connecting the dots and building a business case when you're upselling, cross-selling, when you are selling price increases, for example, and when you're sitting down with them doing reviews or contract renewals and anchoring and renewing your account. So I think it's important to understand that. The other thing is, if you can understand the way they're evaluating you, so what is their evaluation criteria based on those outcomes, and then set goals and metrics with them. So in some cases, you're making progress toward something that they want to accomplish. If you do that, then you're all on the same page. And in some cases, I mean, I've been in situations where managing an account, especially a large account, my buyers, the interest that they had more than anything was that my company would become the vendor for all of their locations. So a national account, they've got multiple locations that are decentralized. And one of the metrics they wanted to know was how are we making progress in converting their locations to the national account because it saves them a lot of money. But I think if you can nail that down up front and understand what the metrics that matter are, then tie that to targets and goal for you and your customers. Two things happen. One, you begin to be held accountable, and you're able to go make the case, I'm delivering value because you and your customer collaborate on defining that. But also, in a lot of ways, it holds your customer accountable because they've already agreed to certain steps, and so when the customer's not upholding their end of the bargain, it's easier to go back and have a conversation and say, we agreed on this particular path, these targets, these goals, these metrics, and we're not getting there. Should we reset and do something different? And I think if you do those things as an account manager, it gives you the foundation on which to begin making progress with your customer long term, strategically.
It shouldn't be a surprise if your customer is not achieving the outcomes they thought they would achieve when they first started the relationship or upgraded their relationship or reinvested into their relationship. And unfortunately, there are independent variables that contribute to that, where time is a problem, resource capacity, specialization of who is doing what on this account relationship, and lack of thereof. I think at the end of the day, though, the best relationships in the world are built on many transactions and outcomes, right? Where there's a reciprocal understanding of who is doing what in the relationship. And if there is not enough of that from one side to the other, there's communication and resolution, and on you go. And that should be true for every relationship, not just a business relationship, but life is a series of those things. So especially when it comes to doubling down on the value of a relationship, right? It has to be well-founded based on evidence of what was going on. And I think every business out there has different success metrics. Some are a little more tangible, some are more subjective. And that may require more interpersonal check down than someone that sells a widget that saves time and money, or someone that creates money, right? Those should be easier to report on. And if they're not being reported on, then that's a huge miss. But I find that the companies that have figured out, especially in today's economic climate, I mean, we're seeing this movie all over again from March 2020, unfortunately. It's just a harsh reality, is that so many businesses didn't even think about, how do I report on success, or how do I maintain the vision of what success should have been with all my client relationships, and how do I keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and not remembering to even keep track of what wins my clients were giving. Because now more than ever, it's important to drive profitability and sustainable growth. The markets are pretty clear on that, whether you're in the private space or public space. So as a salesperson, as an account manager, as a customer relationship person, not having a handle on what you're driving towards or what your customers, more importantly, are achieving is a big miss. And I'm not saying this is a tomorrow thing that everybody listening to this podcast webinar could go do, but it has to be already top of mind for a couple people in your business. So if you're not speaking up about it, take that chance and speak up in a forum that it's probably going to be pretty well received, right? And that does pave the path towards, hey, you know what, on the other end of the spectrum, it's not all doom and gloom. Hey, I've been doing a really good job of supporting this relationship, and you've been achieving these outcomes fantastically well. I hope it's not unfair to assume that we're going to be monetizing some of those outcomes a little bit differently, and I want to give you enough time to prepare for that. I know that's how long-standing relationships have always continued and should continue, right?
And to your point, it's not something you do tomorrow. This is not always easy. It's sometimes when you're sitting down with a stakeholder or with a group of stakeholders as an account manager, and you're trying to get the numbers on the table, or you're trying to get them to articulate how they're evaluating the relationship or the outcomes they're trying to achieve. Sometimes they can't. And this happened to me just this past week with a large organization that we're doing some big time work for. And I realized as the account manager that we were about to go down a road that was going to be a mistake. In other words, the mistake was we were not going to deliver for them the outcome that they wanted. So they were having a hard time articulating any of that. So it was a really, a challenging meeting, and in that we were being very transparent. I was being very upfront, and it was being tough with my customers and articulating to them, you're saying these words, but that's not an outcome. That's something that you're hoping for, that you're wishing for, and that's really going to be hard for us to deliver. I really need to dial this into something that is tangible, that we're walking away with, and that way we can deliver on our promises to you. And this was long after the deal was sold. And this was, we would say even more customer success, because that was exactly right. And it wasn't just this customer, it was a lot of people in the organization. And we were finally able to get below the surface and get some agreement. And what I had to do, Will, was give them some examples of what outcomes look like. And once I gave them the examples, our key stakeholder was able to say, that's what I want right there. And once we were able to identify that, then we were able to come back and go, okay, well, how are you going to measure it? What's that going to look like? And then align our organization, because there's multiple people in our company that are going to be involved in delivering this to this customer. And we were able to come back and get that alignment together. Some of it was a realization after we did all this, that when we sold the account to begin with, and we put the original agreement together, and we've done multiple gigs with them, that when they asked us to do this, and that's account management, you get pulled in because you're there and they say, I've got this problem. We call it the pull strategy, right? So you know that you're shaping buying decisions when they're pulling you in and saying, we want to do this, what do you think? And we had done that. They pulled us in, got a seat at the table, we told them, but we didn't define the outcomes. So when we're in the middle of defining the outcomes, we're realizing that, oh my goodness gracious, we didn't put enough resources into this, and we didn't price it the right way. So we're probably not going to make any money on it. But at least we'll get the outcome for our customer that they've defined, and we know we can deliver at this point, which will hopefully lead to more business down the road.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I think of that similar to when we're setting goals within the marketing team. Our activities month over month, we set a goal over the quarter to hit X number of whatever it is, MQLs, whatnot. And within that quarter, we're evaluating how we're going to achieve that end goal. And that may have looked like this at one point, but then it went, and now it's going a little bit more like this, to figure out kind of how we can combat just not only our activities, our plans for what we're going to do to hit that number wouldn't change, but just adding or taking away any of those additional things that we can do to be able to strive towards that. And I think it's similar in the sense of how you should be working with your customers if you're in that account manager or CSM customer success role. But
but imagine that I'm your vendor and you're in marketing. So I'm your vendor, and maybe I'm your digital advertising vendor, or I provide inbound marketing software or platform for you, and I'm connected directly to your MQL goal. Mm-hmm. So we're communicating, and you're telling me, this is where we are, this is where we're down. It's much easier for me to dive into the numbers and say, here's what I'm seeing, and here's what I might suggest that you adjust. And by the way, there's so many times that turns into an upsell, right? So many times that turns into a bigger buy if I'm connected to that number. If I'm not connected to that number, all I hear you say is, we're not hitting our goals. And I go, wow, I wish you could hit your goals. That'd be great. How are things going? That's the basis of the conversation. Let me introduce you to some people on my team. We'll all go around the horn and introduce each other. And meantime, you're bleeding MQLs and you're thinking, what are you doing for me?
Exactly. I don't want to get on a call. I won't get on a call with anyone if that's the case. Alrighty. So talking about, we've talked about account managers specifically, but I think when we think about companies these days, there's a wide range of companies that are functioning in different ways internally. So some account managers are dedicated to being account managers. Maybe they're also customer success or customer support, but there might even be tiers of the sales organization where there's the account executives selling to new business, account managers selling to customers, upsell, cross-sell, and then customer success teams that are supporting them in that manner. But there might also be a company that has all of that in one person. So Will, in your opinion, how should account managers or those salespeople that are handling it all in one handle their shift from that more transactional role to a strategic partner with enough influence to also potentially support or shape buying decisions? It's a lot.
I think
in one.
It ties in nicely to what we were just talking about. I think if you set the expectation of the relationship at the outset and the outcomes that should be accomplished and the way that relationship works. Now, my therapist jokes and says, you can't manage all relationships the way you manage a sales business relationship, because otherwise you're describing how you want the relationship to be instead of just living it. But in a business relationship, that is important. And especially for that person who is doing the unenviable and admirable job of everything on one desk. We didn't even talk about, Rebecca, they're the ones acquiring the business. Like, let's just assume we're talking about the post-sale experience and the customer relationship. There has to be an expectation that interactions create value for the client. And in those regular scheduled interactions that set and create value for your client, you are constantly creating value and taking a little bit of value back to your business. And at a certain point, that is the only way this can happen, because you will then otherwise become the person who every time you call, there's something you need. I need you to talk to me about our pricing. I need to talk to you about what our client did in this other call that you might not even care about, but I want to tell you about it and show you an outcome. And the one time in my life I've done this job, I did it for 4 or 5 years in that specific spot, I would create regularly scheduled, I'm going to come and just say, we're going to talk to each other for a while. I'll meet you where you are. We're going to have lunch. You're going to have to eat anyway. We're going to have a cup of coffee. We'll go play, do what. Those are the really hard things to do in a virtual world, to be fair, really hard. Some people would argue that it's actually easier because then they don't have to go drive somewhere. They don't have to go have drive time backwards, forwards from an office, or they don't have to go eat a meal they don't want to eat in a place they don't want to eat. But those have to be those moments that you create, because inevitably you are fostering a relationship. And that's how I would always look at my meetings with people is, let's just agree to meet one more time. In that moment though, if you don't bring your A+ game and create value and have reciprocity and develop the relationship, you will not get invited back. You only get one promised meeting over and over and over again, right? And at a certain point that you become less valuable, or you're not reporting on success within the business, or you're not sharing new insights, or you're not adding value and creating value, you won't be invited back. Or you'll be booking meetings that get canceled. Or you'll be flying from one state to another state for 5 client meetings that you thought you had all buttoned up with a client that was going to renew, and they all get canceled when you're in the lobby, right? And we've all seen that probably firsthand in our career, because we all know what that looks like. And in my opinion, humbly, the only way to possibly do that role all in one is to make customer first, make relationship first, and then create and add value to the business relationship 1A, 1B second from there, right? Jeb, I know that so much of your business is in larger businesses. I have to imagine you have a lot of experience with this firsthand too.
Well, first of all, it's if you think about in a business where you've got a division of labor, you've got it set up so the SDRs, or the business development reps, are sort of the setting the stage group, and the account executives are closing the deal. And what account managers do is secure the revenue and the profit and retain the customer over time. So the account managers essentially, they're the ones that deliver the real value to their organization, because that's where the profit drop through comes from. And there's a reason why companies split those roles up. I've worked in all kinds of situations where you sell and then you account manage, or you prospect and you sell. And it's a heck of a lot easier to have someone who prospects and sells, what I would call a full desk. You hunt, and people who account manage. There's a very thin slice of human beings on the earth that have the talent to do both, to go out and hunt, which is one motion, and then come back and do a customer first motion. Most people, because hunting is difficult, will spend all their time on account management. Or if they're really good at hunting and they love that, they'll blow all your accounts up because they won't spend any time on the human side of things. You're just going to go out and put wins on the board. So I would say that if you're in a situation, businesses usually that are in that situation are growing businesses, and they just don't have the ability to get there in the moment. You got to be thinking as an executive, how am I going to get to the place where at least I separate account management and customer success with hunting for new logos. Now if we talk a little bit about value, because I think Will's exactly right. What the people that you're dealing with in your accounts want to walk away with is the feeling that they got more from the conversation than a pitch. They got more from the conversation than you talking at them. But when we think about adding value A is in the eye of the beholder, right? So it's something that they got. It's definitely tied to something that's important to them. So if you understand, for example, in Rebecca's world, that MQLs matter, a value might be having a conversation with her about what another client of mine is doing, where they get a 20% boost in their MQLs, and it's just a best practice. It has nothing to do with what I sell. It's just sharing information. Great example of that is a client of mine who was telling me the story of, and they're in manufacturing, but they were telling the story of a problem they were having in one of their warehouses. And it was the way that the forklifts were going around the warehouses and they couldn't figure it out. One of their vendors, an account manager, who just regularly comes by and spends time with them, just like Will was saying, was having lunch with him one day. He was explaining the problem. And this account manager says, oh, I got one of my clients who was having exactly the same problem. Let me connect you together. Made the connection, solved the problem. And this client, who's a CFO of this company, said, and this is a big company, says, as long as that account manager is working for this vendor, we will never leave. They're in for life. But it was because of value. And let's be clear about this. You can't add value or give value to anyone if you are not valuable. Yeah. You have to be that type of a partner with your company. And we were joking earlier about what account managers say, but for me, that's my number one pet peeve. If you can't come to my company as a consultant and show me how I can do things different, help me change things. I obviously, I know you got to play in your lane, but if you're not coming in and being a part of my world, all you're doing is selling me things, I really don't even need you. Like, for the most part, I can push a button on your website and buy. So what I really need is you work with lots of different people. And I even explained this to my account managers. You work with a lot of different companies out there. You see lots of different things. I'm not talking about just people in my space. Come to me and tell me what people are doing that I don't know about, because that helps me think. And when that happens, usually I'm buying more stuff. Like, usually I'm adding on. Usually I'm saying, how do I get there from here? Let's add this on. So I think that's the key here, is just thinking about what are you doing as an account manager, as a professional consultant that gets you a seat at the table, pull strategy, right? They pull you in. They come to you and say, Will, we're thinking about doing this. Can we get your opinion? That gets you there as a strategic partner. At that level, it's serendipity at a level that it's really hard to imagine. But that's how, at the most complex level, account managers become account managers for life, anchor the business, and are constantly expanding.
There's no better. It's not scalable, but there's no better compliment than to hear, I work with your company because of you. Mm-hmm. As a selfish salesperson, one person, there's nothing better in the world. I work with your company because I value our relationship. To hear that from a client who willingly gives you money for your services or products, to Jeb's point, that is earned over time. And I think there's another piece, Jeb. I think people are intimidated by executives. People are intimidated by buyers. People are intimidated by losses. And there's a hesitation to be inquisitive or spark intrigue. But by nature, business leaders, executives, stakeholders, decision makers are by nature innovative and looking for ways to do their job. Now, certain times, maybe 10, 15 years ago, there were certain companies that you would say, no, my job, I'm gonna stay in my lane. I don't want to go learn how to do a new thing. I just don't want to get fired. I want to collect my pension. I want to get my stock options. There's less and less of that now, Jeb. I don't know if you feel that way, but I just feel like buyers are so informed. They're so up and up on things. People can consume information so many different places that, to surprise your client with a new piece of intrigue or a new solution that they could benefit from, and not really ask them to buy it or about anything in return. Hey, have you heard about this? And I'm not saying you should come in and be like, hey, did you hear about the Celtics game last night? Like, that's not really what I'm driving at. It's more about, hey, how can I be useful to my client and be a resource for them? Monetizing that relationship has its day, maybe if not on every call. And ideally, that was the thing, Jeb, it's funny, the pull, the motion that was scalable at my first company I ever worked at, was a staffing firm, was this headspace of, you want to be the first, and we've talked about this on webinars, podcasts together. You want to be the first business card on the stack that they reach to, right? You literally want to be the person they think about, and they reach out and say, oh, I got to call Jeb up. I got to call Will up. I think they might be able to help me, right? And when you really get a groove, you figured out a way to be that resource that they call, as opposed to you always having a follow up, right? Now, not to say you're not going to follow up. No, I know our sales leaders are probably listening and saying, you follow up too. You got to do that too. Marketing teams are driving awareness every day, but it's really, really important to help your client learn something on every interaction as well, without trying to teach them something. Just be there for them and be a soundbite for them too.
Yeah, just a true story. We were able to displace one of our competitors in what became, over the years, one of our largest accounts. The competitor had a large piece of the business. We had a little itty bitty tiny piece of the business. We got our foot in the door on something, just a small project. And while we were there, I was managing this particular account. I met their executives, and I would always offer, listen, if you got any problem, call me. You know, if you've got a sales issue, I love talking about. I just love talking about sales. It's just my thing. And I'd get a email or a call, and and they would say, hey, we've got this problem. What would you do in this situation? And I would answer the question, and they would say, what do you do in this situation? I answer the question, and they would say, well, we're having a problem over here. What do you suggest? And I would suggest something, and we got a little bit more trust built. And then one day my competitor made a mistake, and they said, hey, could you help us out? Your competitor screwed this up, and we need you to fill in. I know it's just temporary, and there's nothing in it for you. Could you help us? I said, sure. So we jumped in and we rocked it. Like, we were so good. And that was the last time our competitor ever serviced that business, because they said, this was so good, we want to figure out how can we keep doing with you. That took 5 years to get to that point. But it turned from a little tiny itty bitty account to a really nice 7-figure account just by pecking away. And like you said, it's just help. I was, another account, I met one of their executives and who was saying something about our studio. I said, you're in Atlanta, come see me. We'll do a tour for you, come have lunch. I'll show you everything we do. I'll open up my books, I'll talk to all our people. I'll show you everything. Came down, met with us, introduced us to somebody else. It paid off. We never asked for a piece of business. They gave it to us. Mm-hmm. But it's that willingness to be open and help people. Like, my entire focus as an account manager is literally to be of service to them. And I figure everything comes after that. And it's funny you said that, this comment that I do business here because of you. I wrote a book called People Love You. Probably not the best title, but that book was written specifically for that comment. Like, people aren't doing business with your company, they're doing business with you. And oh, by the way, part of your role as an account manager is to deal with the imperfection of all the things that your business does. And that's clearly woven into an imperfect fabric of humans and their business, everybody's business. You've got to manage all of that and be that human being that's in the middle, that people say, I just can't live without this person. I cannot live without Will. And that's the true definition of adding value. You're so valuable that they just don't feel like if they feel like if you went away, something bad would happen.
I agree with all of that as a buyer, just as my 2 cents here. The best upsell I've ever been upsold with was having a lot of what you guys talked about, having monthly meetings with them, and the tool is valuable. It's not like it wasn't, or anything went rocky in any way, but they were able to upsell me on a additional feature that I wasn't aware of, solely by hearing me out in one meeting the month prior, then bringing to, just talking about what's going on, how we're using the tool, all the fun stuff. And then coming to the next monthly meeting with a case study on, hey, like, I heard you in the last call. Here's a couple of case studies that I found when I was doing some research on just how we can help you, of customers that have helped. Back when we first were sold on this product, I was asking for case studies. My director is always asking for case studies. They're always asking how people are using it, what's the value, all that kind of stuff before we can purchase. So he remembered that in that scenario, and months later, trying to upsell me. I don't remember the official timeline, but it was a month prior. We were talking about it. The next month I had case studies, and within a week we were purchasing the additional features. But he didn't press the product itself and in the feature itself unless I had any questions on it, and then we would go back and forth on it. But it was just a way of delivery really made it so that I wasn't. We get a lot of we have a lot of products that we use in marketing, a lot of platforms, a lot of products, a lot of things. And they're always like, oh, here's our new feature. Here's our new thing. Here's this, here's that. But it never comes from a perspective of like, I heard you have this issue. We have this product that you weren't aware of in the beginning. or weren't ready to purchase in the beginning, hey, reminder of this feature or product. But that was probably the most successful upsell without it feeling I was being sold at or to. Awesome. All right. So moving into this, we mentioned a little bit that some of this might be a little bit repeatable, but I know, Will, you mentioned this repeatable process. So why and how should account managers or salespeople, wherever you sit in this account management world, build an account management process that's repeatable and adaptable for every customer? Will, if you want to kick things off, because you did mention this a little bit in your last.
I think it comes to a point where that relationship becomes strong and the business is doing well for its handful of clients, and then the next stage comes. Whether that happens over 10 years, over 5 months, over whatever it ends up being, the business realizes, well, we have something here, right? And unfortunately, Jeb can't go to 1,000 meetings a month, right? And so at a certain point, specialization of the role is a necessity. I just don't have any other way to see it. I don't know that I will ever be convinced that it's not necessary to specialize the relationship management piece of what your business is doing, because I feel like you need the person who is solely focused on listening and developing the relationship, and using the sports analogy, the quarterback on the field who knows all the plays, who knows all the positions, and just needs to orchestrate, or you can make it be a conductor in an orchestra, or whatever metaphor you need to pick, right? Because at a certain point, that person's skill set has to scale across multiple conversations a day, while in tandem, specialists within the organization can come and support the need. So that person figuring out that Rebecca had a need, he or she had to go orchestrate internally the right team to go identify the case study, if it wasn't readily accessible. Hopefully it was, right? Go orchestrate scheduling the next conversation. Hopefully there was an SDR to do that. Orchestrate who else needed to be on the call, for the post call, for the follow-up, for the pricing, for the proposal, for the execution of that happening all within a week of meeting with Rebecca the second time. And I like to imagine, Jeb said it out loud earlier, there is a 1% of the world that is able to do all of that. That is either in a certain life stage where they don't have other obligations, has a certain just 12th speed drive gear that they can work 23 hours a day. It's not ever going to scale. And if you have someone that's doing that in your business and achieving success, you owe it to them and the other people in your business to go and start to pick apart what it is that they do and what they do best, and start to align other people around them as fast as possible. If nothing else, to just figure out all the different things they're doing. Because if you're going to take it to the limit, that one really good person who's doing everything is going to quit, or their spouse is going to say, I need you to leave, or they're going to take a leave of absence, or they're going to start to suffer at their performance. And the good news is, again, we've seen way too many examples of it being successful to separate account manager, quarterback, relationship driver, specialists who understand how to align solutions. Customer success is not account management. That is a dedicated role to align furthering the relationship between the business and kind of being that concierge to orchestrate all the interactions. Technical specialist, if that is required for the company you work for, right? And learning and development, training, ongoing education and support, marketing support. The best companies in the world don't always have the best product. They just execute on the best idea, and they figured out how to make each person do the one thing really well over and over again, and they find out where strengths are. And I think there's such an exciting opportunity here, because I bet people listening to this call may be in a role right now where they're like, I would be so much better if that was my only job all day. Like, just have that internal conversation out loud with someone, because I bet you that your business is already thinking about it. Or, I think at a certain point, like, maybe the business doesn't want to grow past a certain point, and even having that conversation is okay, right? Not every company in the world wants to go from 100 to 500 employees to 1,000 employees to $1 billion in revenue to $50 billion in revenue. Like, it's all about aligning to what your goals of your business are, but also based on how well you are aligned to each of the things that your client needs. And then you can hire into those roles, because you know what success looks like, and it's not by accident that someone just happened to do a really good job of triaging a customer need, right? It was their job. That was what they were there for. And I'm interested, Jeb, if like you guys have run into companies that have a little too much of like, that's not my job. Like I'm sure in your experience of meeting larger growing organizations, like there's a specialization problem where they're too specialized and siloed. Like I'm interested to hear your thoughts there.
I think to some extent, I think probably what I run into more often than not is that companies have provided account managers with a team, and the account managers take on all of the responsibility and work themselves. So I find, especially as you start scaling up and the accounts get larger and larger, the account manager continues with the mindset that so many sales professionals have, is that, well, if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself. So this person ends up dropping the ball and making mistakes and not taking care of their customers versus really using their team to accomplish for them. I will find sometimes where you've got account managers that need to bring in subject matter experts from different parts of the organization. And those subject matter experts may be, for example, corporate buyers that have nothing to do with customers. Like they're on the backside of that. And there'll be situations where it's a cultural thing where they go, I don't talk to customers. But more often than not, what I find is that account managers don't know how to leverage their team so that they can spend the time doing what they're best at. And what account managers should be best at is expanding the relationships. And that's where I think that, and that's where, by the way, where the value side goes. And Rebecca's story about, I bought something, but I didn't sell it to me. That's what great account managers do. Account managers, when I say your job is to expand the account, the account manager goes, well, I got to go sell stuff. And I'm like, no, you have to go give this person value, and you need to find ways to help them so that they want to give you more money. Your job is to grow and grow and grow. And back when I was a national account manager, I had a huge portfolio of business. One of the things that allowed me to be, I was like a national account manager of the year every single year. I got a trophy case full of going to Hawaii with these things. But the thing that made me, I guess, win at that role was that I had a group of people that I worked with who were my support staff. And so customers needed reports on things. They did that. Customer needed this over here. Somebody else did that. Somebody needed to get their people set up. Somebody else did that. I treated that group like they were gold. I took them to dinner. I sent them flowers. I gave them gifts. I managed them like a quarterback manages their front line. Because they were doing all of those things. And meantime, I was doing what I was really good at, which is standing in front of customers. And I'm going to say this out loud because I'm the guy that wrote the book, Virtual Selling. You can close business all day long in a virtual environment, and I'm all for it. But there is something special about an account manager going to see your customer. Now, the beautiful thing about the virtual world is you don't have to do this every week. In some cases, you could go twice a year. But if you're managing larger accounts, do yourself a favor, go there in person. Trust me on this. It anchors relationships like nothing else in the world. But if you're doing all the work, if you're having to spin yourself in circles to put the proposal together, and there's a proposal putting together team, you can't go spend the time in front of your customer just having lunch and listening and getting them to talk to you and open up. And as they're talking to you and you're listening, you're putting, all of the connections together, you go, you know what? You should see this. I got another customer who's using this feature and they were able to do this with it. I don't know, Rebecca, if this even worked for you, but you should see this. And all of a sudden, Rebecca's leaning in because now we're connecting the dots. You can't do that if you're consumed with doing all the admin work and all the other things that you're not good at.
100%. Awesome. All right. So let's wrap up here. I think this is going to fold into what we were just talking about a minute ago and Jeb, you touched on this a little bit with opportunities and making sure that that account manager has that time to be able to dissect that customer and find those missing or potential opportunities. So I guess, in your opinion, why is it important to create maybe a systematic process like you just mentioned, or maybe a process for specifically developing new opportunities within their accounts and anchoring those relationships with customers to retain those accounts? So you mentioned a couple of things with being in person, but how can we do that virtually as well?
Well, the thing about an account management system is that it's a process, it's a methodology. and it is a systematic set of steps that you go through to manage an account base, and it's repeatable. So in Selling the Price Increase, the book we were talking about earlier, there's a section in there on earning the price increase. You're going to earn the price increase by managing your accounts. But if you don't have a system for managing your accounts, it's going to be random. You'll spend all your time, in a lot of cases, what account managers do, spend all your time putting out fires with the accounts that are squeaking, that are, they're saying, oh, we've got an alarm over here, and you spend no time with your accounts that need to be managed, that need to grow, that need to expand, and then along, comes a price increase, for example, and then you show up, and now they're mad at you because you took them for granted. And in fact, and I'll put the number on the table, but I would guarantee if you went back and took a look at all the deals, all the accounts, not deals, but accounts that you lost, customers, that 70% of the time, if you get to the root cause, it's because you were taking them for granted. You weren't there. And if you don't have a system, it's easy not to be there. It's easy to spend all your time with a handful of accounts. So what a system does, a system basically takes your entire account base, and then it segments that account base based on the value of those accounts to the organization, because that matters. I'm not going to spend the same amount of time on a small account as I am on an enterprise level account that is generating a lot of profit for the organization. You're also going to segment the accounts by market share or wallet share. So for example, I may have Will's account where I've got only 10% of the potential spend of his business because he's doing business with a bunch of different vendors. That's a growth opportunity. But Rebecca, your account, I may have you completely locked up. I've got a contract that is exclusive. I've got almost all of your business. So in your account, I need to defend the account and retain you over time. Whereas in Will's situation, retention is really not the biggest thing I need to focus on. It is growing. But if I don't have a system to tell me what motion I'm in, that becomes a problem. I'm going to have a different set of touch points for a growth account than I am for a retention account. And of course, there are going to be some that are in the middle. And I like to use a red, yellow, green type of a program for the different segmentation, but I also have renewals. So, I've got growth and I've got a certain number of customers. If I'm in a contract-based business where I've got a certain number of renewals that are coming up every single year, do I have a system to early renew those accounts, or am I screaming at the last minute after they've got my competitor in there, and now I'm in trouble and I'm trying to to beg my way into the account, and it goes on from there. So I should have a business plan for my account portfolio. I should have a system for bringing in new accounts into the portfolio, because during the year I'm going to get handed new accounts. I should have a system where if I'm handed an existing account that someone else was managing, how am I working with that? And I've been on the receiving end of those deals, and sometimes they're not very happy because the account manager got fired because they weren't doing their job, and now I own it. So you need to have all of those things in place, and essentially, it's an account management playbook that everyone can run with. And that segmentation piece is really big, because that'll also help you segment out your account managers so that you've got your very best talent focused on your most at-risk businesses, or customers where if something happened to them, it would seriously impact the business. And you've got account managers that are learning on customers that if they make a mistake on, we don't want to make a mistake, but if they make a mistake on a company, it's not a customer that's going to break the business. And I think that's where a lot of big companies, really big companies, kind of have those playbooks in place. It's the mid-sized and small companies that, in a lot of cases, because what Will said, not a lot, people aren't really good at this. They're not good at both of them. So then they start losing customers. So then they figure they're in an emergency. I've got to split this up. And then they throw people at it, and then they go manage accounts. And that's the extent of the process. And so if you're in that situation, it makes sense to stop. This truly is not rocket science. It is good business. That's the best way I can say that. This is the same business plan that you would put together for your organization, you put together for managing your accounts. And then from there, as you grow and evolve, you can define roles and create protocols. And when this happens, but no system, no process, you're really putting your customers at risk. And that's the worst thing for a business, to lose existing customers.
I don't have much else to add. I worked for someone pre-acquisition twice removed, early days at ZoomInfo. His name is Peter Wayman. He was an executive at a company called CardScan. Becca, you remember Peter. He sold CardScan to no Rubbermaid. It's got story after story, Jeb. He wouldn't sign the deal with the sales rep got him a Mont Blanc pen and he wouldn't sign it because it wasn't a dual pen. or other way around. I think they wanted to sign it with a dual pen and he was like, no, I signed deals with Mont Blanc. And he had a saying that I think can translate to a lot of different things, but definitely to what Jeb had just said. So just to put a big old emphasis spot on what Jeb said, is that in sales, you want to make the news, not report the weather. And metaphorically, what that means is you should not be telling people about things that have already happened that you could look out the window and see for yourself. You should be making the news. And yes, this is a ZoomInfo Sales Gravy co-sponsored webinar podcast. Yes, set up signals and trigger events on your accounts inside of ZoomInfo. How many times do you meet with someone that says, oh, we bought that product months ago. You sell something like that? Or, hey, we wish we knew that you'd done this. Or, hey, we hired a new person and they had a whole agenda and you just hadn't met them in time. I can't emphasize enough how much of what Jeb said is so simple. You're just in the dang room making the news and not reporting on the weather after the fact. And not to mention your executives will thank you for taking that approach, because nothing worse than telling your big boss, hey, we're not going to hit our net retention number because they already bought some other point solution. Why didn't we know that? I hadn't met them yet. Right?
Ouch.
And that has to be the most common thread of what every account manager at every company in the world has had that experience feeling, because they were worried about rocking the apple cart with the pricing. They didn't want to talk about the renewal too early, too late. They were too busy doing too many things. They didn't respond to their client just to say, I see you, I validate you, I'll get back to you later tonight, right? And they weren't organized on top of it all else. Some of the easiest relationships you'll get, and I have a friend that he's a private banker for ultra high net worth individuals. And he works with multiple billion-dollar families who give him their business purely because it's him. Because it's him, not because he works for one of the largest depository institutions in the world, because he does. But it can't be more true that you have to be aware of what's going on within your accounts that you're managing. And if you're too busy, you're either not specialized in your role, you're taking on things that you should be sharing with your account team, you're not getting involved in things you should be on the other side. Maybe there's a conversation with a specialist joining one of your client calls that you could be an observer and hear and listen. And there are so many technologies. Yes, we sell a lot of them at ZoomInfo. I would recommend looking at all of them that unlock the insights about when to reach out and who to reach out to. But it's too hard to do it all manually. And I hope that you read Jeb's book, because so much of this is covered in it. And I hope that you look into solutions. If it's not ZoomInfo, it should be first. But if you feel like we're not a fit for your business, we'd love to be a resource for you at some point in the future, right? Because I know that these are all things that are repeatable and scalable once you put them in place, and create so much value for your client and for your business too. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. This was great. I know that there's a lot for the audience to unpack from the content you delivered today. Obviously, I think for any of you on the call, none of what we talked about today is going to be an immediate, takeaway or an immediate change that you can make within your organization. But I hope that there's at least one tiny thing that you can utilize to build out that business plan or change your scope on how you're handling your accounts, and hopefully that helps down the road for you. But thank you all for joining us. Jeb, thank you for being here. Will, thank you for joining us. Definitely check out Jeb's book, Price Increase. It's at the link below us right here. So definitely check that out and purchase. And we'll see you guys back at another one of these wonderful webinars. Thanks so much and have a good day.